Hello and welcome to the Core Advantage podcast. My name's Darren McInnes.
And I'm Jacob Tober.
On the podcast, we talk about all things sports science, strength and conditioning, and athletic development.
You'll find links, show notes, and references in the podcast details and also on our website.
Hello.
Hey, Darren. Hello, Mum, as well. She's just mentioned something in the comments. How you going?
Got to say hi to your mum. So, how you doing?
It's a weird world we're living in at the moment.
Yeah, I'm feeling. I just feel. I feel really sad for what's going on in America. Yeah, it's definitely like we discussed not even doing the podcast. It feels like it's such a bad time and such, just such a difficult time. And it's made me think a lot. I think, we inherit our privilege and we don't really notice it. So as a middle-class white Anglo-Saxon man in the eastern suburbs of Melbourne, I'm about as privileged as it gets.
Yep.
And like for most of us, we are, if you think about the entirety of the 7.8 billion people on the earth, if we percentile ranking where we're sitting in terms of great fortune, we've got to be top 10 million.
Individuals?
The whole world,
yeah.
Yeah. Like I've got to be somewhere in the top 10 million in terms of good fortune.
Yeah. And it's not like we worked for that. We just would that was a cultural birthright that we stumbled into.
Yeah. Yeah. Like it's not, I didn't do anything to deserve that. It's just, how it is. And I just keep finding myself reflecting on the fact that how hard it is for people that, didn't get dealt the same cards and for whom life is, fearful and weird and difficult. I came back from my run the other day and there was a guy in a delivery truck pulled over by the highway patrol. And as I walked past, they just gave me, the head nod, hey mate, head nod. And I gave them the head nod and I was just like,
the police
cop,
this is?
The police, yeah. Yeah, not the criminal. And I just thought, for me, my experience of interactions with the police is not fearful. I get to go through life not being worried about that stuff. And I just, it's like, no matter what we seem to say, it doesn't seem to elicit change. It seems it's just, I was a bit, complacent about Australia. I was thinking, geez, terrible, what's going on in America. It's like, there's been 400 Aboriginal deaths in custody since 1991, I think.
One a month was what I heard last night on the project. The project's doing a really good job at the moment. They're doing some great work. Yet they said one Indigenous person per month since 91 has died in custody every month the entire time.
So I just wanted to get that out there that we want to express how much I think silence is complicit. You're being complicit if you're silent, and so if you don't speak out and say this is unacceptable, we as a population in Australia and in the world need to. It's 2020. We need to get past this and actually start to treat everyone really well. And I think where we need to be at is where people like you and I are as vocal as people of colour who are trying to elicit change.
Like our friends, like our friends, athletes, like Liz and Trez, who do a fantastic job. Brilliant people, brilliant athletes, and it's like we need to be. Yeah, you're right. We need to be showing how much of an ally we are, as much as they are showing look after me and my family. It's like look after our friends,
look after our world. Yeah, because this is not a good. A really simple rule is to just be the opposite of Donald Trump. I think if you just played that way, that would be great. But yeah, let's look after each other. So anyway, that's our bit.
It just feels I just feel so flat because it feels so frustrating because it's so systemic. It feels all like you feel like a child when you just can't do anything. It's like it's just
And look, I've studied civil rights history. I did that at uni, and it feels like we're back to 1965. before the civil rights movement had really...
We've made no progress, yeah.
And I mean, I guess we have made some progress, but not the progress we should. If you're tracking it out from there, you would have thought we'd made a lot more by now. It's anyway. I think we're still just these tribal little monkeys who look after our own and don't have enough empathy for people that aren't exactly like us. So anyway. So having said that, let's move on and actually have a podcast. But I just wanted to get that off our chest and say that I think if all of us can make an effort to call out people around us, like it's really uncomfortable to call out people around you if they're racist. It's really uncomfortable.
Sexist. Yep.
Yeah. Like
let's
just get our game on. Let's make. What I would hope is that the horribleness that is going on actually acts as a lightning rod for the majority of people in the world, and they go, and we have the kind of concept of the sacrificial anode. Like we're all against that one thing. It's the one thing that bonds us as being against that. So that's my little wish for the day.
Nice.
All right, let's check it out. Let's talk. Let's talk
Move
sports.
on from world politics. Let's talk sports. Let's talk performance. Yeah. Let's talk strength and conditioning, fitness.
I've been so busy with getting the relaunch. There's so many things to do in
countdown.
So little time.
Yeah.
Oh my God. What have we got? We've got 18 days till relaunch.
Weeks,
and it feels like there's about 800 items on my to-do list. So I haven't actually, and look, we're going to be releasing more information about the changes we're making to the gym, because we are not just reopening the gym, we are relaunching it. We're changing a number of significant aspects of how it operates, and I can't wait to show that off. I'm going to give a tiny bit away. How good is our new reception desk?
Yeah. The new little waiting area, kiosk, kitchen reception thing.
The recovery bar.
The multi-purpose space. Yeah, it's great. I'm really happy with that work. That's gonna be a ripping space, I reckon.
Yeah, so I'm super psyched about that. That's great. Sorry, I've just got a notification come up that someone else was doing a live, and it jumped into my live. I'm like, surely no, I'm busy doing a live. So I'm super excited about all that, but we're so busy. So as a consequence, I have not thought of anything to talk about other than the aforementioned stuff. What do you got?
Similar. I haven't really thought much about performance this week. It's been more like, is the world going to end any day now? Just watching all the parts of the apocalypse just bring themselves together. But I thought, like you said, the show must go on. We still got to talk about something. We're a weekly show, so we're going to do a weekly episode. So I thought we'd go completely off topic, which is something we haven't talked about much and haven't really put it together in one show. It'd be nice to do one show we put it all together. Let's talk about agility training and agility testing, because there's a lot.
Hey, are you sure we haven't talked about it?
Oh, we have. We've talked about bits of it. Like we've talked about agility versus change of direction versus movement of feet, and we've talked about bits. But I think one thing that often happens in the semantics of strength and conditioning and performance is people get very uppity about what the definition of agility is.
Oh,
it's not agility, it's change of direction. They get very, very fussy about that. So I thought it'd be worth talking about that. And I thought a good lens to talk about that would be through the lens of performance testing, which we do a lot of and we're quite passionate about. Because, and we'll talk about the definition for agility, because when it comes to agility, it's so specific that it's really hard to test. And you can't actually track improvements in that because the testing by definition would have to be random. So it's I think it's a lot more blended, agility and change of direction, than people often make out in literature in the real world. And I think it's worth diving into why that is and how to go about it.
Oh, what an interesting topic. Yeah, I love it. I guess, and we should set that up first by talking about the definitions. So the technical definition for agility is a whole body change of direction in response to an external stimulus.
Yep. So or a variation of that, yeah.
So technically, if it's not that, if it's pre-planned, then it's not agility. It's change of direction.
Yep.
And that in itself, it's one of those things where it's totally valid look at it through that way, because that's the truth of the matter. That's the technical definition. And also what's really fascinating is the way we're wired up is different. So if you know what you're going to do, your muscles are much more organized. Remember that Dara Curley,
yeah, it was a really cool study he shared with us that talked about
that a little.
Oh my goodness! I just got a phone call. Go away, girlfriend. I'm busy talking about agility. His study that Dara shared was they showed a 45-degree cut in, I think it was rugby players, and they compared when you knew which direction you were going versus responding to a light, and the way you activated your muscles around the joint were completely different. Apples and oranges, different EMG. Like the rate at which it came on, the sequencing, which muscles were activated the most. It was just a completely it was a completely different movement, even though you're doing the same left or right foot cut.
And it was less the textbook movement you want. Like when you had the time to pre-load what you were going to do, it tended to be the glute med fires, then this, then that. Whereas when it was a genuine agility response to an external stimulus you weren't predicting, it was just this, every muscle just it's just this chaotic
free for all.
Make a muscle. It's really interesting. And so it does give validity to distinguishing between the two, because there is a difference. So you should, if you just practiced change of direction, which is where you know what you're going to do, if you only did that, then that's probably pretty bad, because you're not going to develop that other ability to be reactive on the spot. You need to have both abilities.
Just like athletes who get really good at training and really good at drills and then suck in the game.
Yeah.
Like a drill boy. So you become a drill cutter, where you can only cut. Yeah. I could do it. Just tell me the way to go first. It's like, well, no, that's not how sport works. You got to be ready.
And so it's worth knowing about. But I think, the interesting thing is should we talk about how you get better for both? Because I think, so you've got the two different flavors of, and I'm going to put them both under the umbrella of agility, because I think the naming of it, I just disagree with. I just think they're both agile. Like if I'm taking someone right and I'm suddenly going left, I'm like, yeah, that's agility. Like I'm moving rapidly, it's agility. Underpinning them is your strength. I think that's probably one of the most often missed things, is you see people doing all these footwork things and not addressing strength. I'd like to talk about and I'm not expecting you to quote the exact correlation value of it, but the correlation we found between relative body strength and agility when we did our testing with a pretty large cohort at Core Advantage.
Yeah, we tested about 200. That was the first combine. We tested about 200 athletes. That was the one we really crunched the numbers in. It was massive. It was the most correlated of all the tests we did to strength. So we did vertical, we did speed, we did fitness, we did strength, and we did agility. And agility and strength had the highest correlation of all those ones when matched to
lower body strength.
Lower body relative strength to your size. Yeah. And
for those playing at home on the relative strength thing, I think it's a really important distinction, because absolute strength is just how much weight you can move, and it doesn't take into account how heavy you are. So you could have someone who weighs 100 kilos and can move 120, and that's okay. But you could have someone else who weighs 70 kilos and can move 120, and they've got vastly superior relative strength. And so it's the relative strength in the same way as like the relative strength of a car. Like if you've got a Ferrari with this really light body and this big engine, that's got really good relative strength. Whereas a big old bus or a truck
might have the same engine.
More absolute strength.
Exactly. Yeah. The same absolute strength, but you could have the bus and the Ferrari with the same engine. The Ferrari is going to have much more acceleration and power because it's moving less car. It's moving less vehicle for the amount of engine. So it doesn't have as much inertia and inertia to brake and momentum to build. It can do it a lot quicker. And that makes perfect sense when you look at agility, or let's call them change of direction tests, because that's what they are by the scientific definition. If you look at things like a 5-10-5 or a 5-0-5, what you're testing is your ability to decelerate your body and then re-accelerate your body. So if you're enormous and not very strong, you've got nothing, no eccentric strength to apply the brakes when you hit the corner, and then no concentric strength to create power out of that corner either. Whereas if you're strong and you're light and you can quickly wash off that speed into the corner and then re-accelerate out of it quite nimbly, then you're going to perform better on those tests. So it makes perfect sense that the stronger you are, the better you're going to be. And what I think is most interesting is then we compare that to, say, for example, the 10-meter sprint test that we do as well through athletes, is that correlation wasn't as high on the 10-meter sprint because it's much more of an elastic technical test, whereas agility, it seems you can be a messy runner, you can run ugly. I'm not recommending you do, but you can be a messy runner in an agility test and still do really well just by having wicked reactive and relative strength.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and it's almost like, I think I always prefer things that favor the grinders. Things that favour the people that work really hard for what they get. Because I feel like, the talented people get given so much anyway. So you can have people who just have this beautiful talent for movement. And you'll see that in the 10-metre sprint. You'll see that in a 20-metre sprint. They've just got that God-given elasticity in their body that they just move really beautifully. But what I love is with agility is if you just work on your strength, if you work on it, your change of direction will get better. And it's a pretty linear relationship. The stronger you are, provided you don't suddenly get big as a house, you're gonna go really well.
It's important that you mentioned. Sorry, it's important that you mentioned change of direction though, because not necessarily your agility may not necessarily get better as a result of that. So it's worth. I think this is a good point to talk about that sports specificity of movement, which I think is the big. This is the big part where the definition and the clarification between agility and change of direction does really matter. Which is you could do all that strength training, all that change of direction training, all that technical stuff in the gym, but if you still suck at reading ruck contests as a footballer, you're still going to suck at reading ruck contests as a footballer. Like that's not just magical. I'm so strong now. Why can't I get more? Why can't I get more? Disposals and clearances. It's like, well, do you know the game?
Because you can't read as well. And because there was a great study that I think the AIS did, and they were comparing elite netballers to sub-elite netballers and their reaction times to make interceptions. And what they found was that a lot of the time, the actual action of making the change of direction, the change of body movement, was either the same pace or slower than the sub-elite. The professionals weren't actually faster, but they were way quicker at reading what was going to happen. So they spent their whole lifetime honed in on the cues that a person's body gives when they're going to pass a certain direction, and they could make those reads really, really well. So yeah, it was a whole different skill. The skill was not so much change of direction that was paying off. It was anticipation of direction. And now it breaks my heart when we've seen it with some of our athletes who. You see them in the gym and they're doing everything great, and then you see them on the court and you're like, you just don't read the game. Yeah. That's not our job. We can't teach you that. And sometimes that's just I think there's an innate, in the same way as your IQ, the speed and power of the processor you have. I think there's also an innate component with that as well. But where it gets interesting, I suppose, is how do you think about testing that stuff in a way that's actually fair and meaningful? And we went on a bit of a journey with that, didn't we?
Yeah, because on the one hand, it's like, well, okay, basketballers do these kind of movements. Let's set up a test for basketballers and somehow make it reactive. But by creating a reactive component, you add randomness. And if you look at trying to quantify testing performance, randomness is exactly what you don't want, because then next time, I have to make sure we do it the same next time. Then there's a learning effect. Comes this massive, messy, slippery slope rabbit hole of, well, how do we test agility? But then track progress over time.
Yeah. It's crazy. You've just reminded me of one of my earlier exposures. This was maybe 2004, and it was to a very elite program. I won't name names, but it was top notch. You don't get much better than this in the basketball universe. Senior professional athletes. And they had devised their own test. And the test involved It was like sprint to the top of the key, shuffle to the side, sprint, drop step, back to the baseline, go around, run across the baseline, jump up, slap a vertex as high as you can, come back down, sprint, come back, done. And so the idea was
it's like the NBA All-Star Skills Challenge.
Yeah,
but without a ball.
Everything. Yeah, and it was really cool because it had been very well thought out and actually tested a number of different attributes that were great to measure. But it had this, and it was timed. The whole thing was timed. But it had this fundamental flaw that, and I'm not trying to be a smart ass to say, look at me, I'm so clever. But I just stepped in, and sometimes it was just distance. I think had I been in the meetings developing it, I probably wouldn't have even noticed. I came in with fresh eyeballs. And I came in and I saw one of the athletes doing the vertical thing, and they had an amazing, there's some people when they jump, you just go, it's like, oh, that's such a beautiful athlete.
Yep.
You know? And I've watched this athlete jump and just hang and hang and hang. And I'm like,
89, 90 centimeter vertical leap.
Yeah, you're going to do crap on that test because all that time you're spending in the air is time you can't be spending being agile.
So everyone else gets a 15 and he's got a 19 because of that 4 centimeter hang time.
You've taken it, and so it was, and I think that made an impression on me. And then, another, probably a decade down the track, we were looking at what used to be and may still be the standard that the AAS was using, which was the diamond agility test, which had a whole lot of different components as well to it. And that was better because everything was staying on the ground, but it was still a lot of different things. Like it could still be, do you have a good drop step? Don't you? And in the end, we decided on actually dialing it right back and just getting something really simple because we thought, well, let's just see how they are moving left, how they are moving right, and that's probably your least worst test. Is that how you think about it?
Yeah, because you kind of touched on it in there where you talked about like if they don't have a good read of the game, that's not really our job as strength and conditioning coaches. We often get asked, can you help us with our shooting or our kicking? It's like, well, we can make you stronger, so maybe you'll kick further. But if you don't have good timing and rhythm, that's kind of on your footy coach or your soccer coach to help you with that side of things.
It's not our job.
And so we'll make you strong, we'll help you be bulletproof, we'll make you fitter, but skill things that you got to really do in skill. So with the agility testing, to stick to that kind of philosophy, your agility test shouldn't be testing agility because your basketball coach should be teaching you, when to step over screens, when to step under screens, when to turn and chase, when not to. Those are kind of basketball philosophical and technical questions. They're not really our space. And so our agility test then should actually, our physiology, that's our department. So our agility test should therefore be moved back into the realm of pure physiology, and I
wanted to be something that was multi-sport too.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it needs to be something that everyone can get around that's actually valid for every sport. Yeah.
Yeah, which means if you play a sport that requires any form of change of direction or agility, this test will tell you just roughly how good your strength is, your technique, your ability to accelerate, decelerate on both legs. And so the 5-10-5 is really the answer we sort of came to.
And 5-10-5, walk everyone through that.
Yeah, so there's technically we do a modified 5-10-5. You start in the middle of the test, and the numbers refer to the distance. So first you go, for example, left. You'll have to do it left and right, but you go left first, 5 meters. Hit the side. We call it modified because we don't touch the line with our hands. Because another thing with the agility test is the taller you are, and so many of these tests start with you on your belly or on your back, or you have to get down and touch the ground. It's like not many sports are you actually required. You have to get down. You definitely got to have some mobility, but the ground is so far away if you're 7 feet tall. That's so not fair. So we took out the ground touch, and we just made it your foot had to get the line. You just had to get some amount of the tape on the line with your foot.
And I like that a lot more too because it is still closer to real world change of direction. There's actually not many scenarios where you have to run in hard run direction, touch the ground and then turn. Generally your hands are not on the ground, you're up and about. So I feel like it's actually more representative of that foundational strength and movement skill.
Sporting change of direction, yeah. So it's 5 meters in one direction. touch the line with your foot, and then 10 meters back the other direction, back through the middle where you started, and then you change again on that end, and then 5 meters back through the middle to stop the clock or stop the timer gate or whatever it is you're using to time the sprint. Yep. And so you've got 5, another 10, and then a 5. So you end up with 20 total meters and 3 change of directions if you want to count that first acceleration as a change.
And we should say it's a total waste of time doing it with a stopwatch. Like the only thing you're getting out of a stopwatch is a learning effect. Like if you've got to do it to practice it for doing a real test, do it. But in terms of actual data, it's totally the precision required to do it is not. Humans are not capable of it, so you just can't. You're not going to get anything out of it. So stopwatch-based times for this stuff just don't work.
Because once you've got an athlete that's at least middle to high end of intermediate for their gym experience, sporting experience, a big improvement is 1/10 of a second. If they go from 4.8 to 4.7, crack the champagne. Let's celebrate. Let's party. What a victory! This athlete's a beast. Program successful. Well done. And to think you could catch that with bip is just ridiculous. So you got to have some sort of a gate or a timing beam that you have to break of some sort. Yeah. Lasers.
There have to be cool technological things involved for that to work. Yeah.
Sadly, expensive things as well, though. And that's not us trying to upsell. It's not we have. There's no random sponsor for this episode. That's just how it works.
It's just the reality of it. Yeah. That doesn't mean you shouldn't practice it with a stopwatch because you can still get used to doing it under pressure and develop the skill of doing it and trying hard. But you can't actually. There's no validity to that data, so you don't want to put any weight in it.
Yep.
So. I think that's turned out to be a really good test. I've really enjoyed the intensity people bring to it, and I think it's reflective of a lot of the things we're working on. In terms of its validity, it's lower, but there's not really a good alternative choice, is there? In terms of something that's repeatable for everyone, that doesn't get you bogged down into that reactivity randomness. Like the idea of running along and you see a certain light goes on and you go the other direction, it's good, but how do you, unless you make it all identical, that's good training.
Yeah, thank you. That's what I was about to say. Let's not confuse testing with training, because with training, like with the research paper we mentioned right back at the start, you still should be doing some training that's both random and planned. ACL return to play stuff, ankle return to play stuff. It's all classic situation where you go from closed to open. And you start with, okay, at that cone, turn left, at that cone, turn right, run around that cone, like all planned. You know exactly what you're doing ahead of time. Then you control the speed and the volume. And then as you go, the coach starts pointing or blowing a whistle or lights or whatever it might be. But when it comes to just testing it, it gets very, very confusing when you go, this test is for this part of agility and this test is for this part of agility. Like just test the physiology and then ask the coach, are they getting faster on the court or field? Coach says yes, you're winning.
Then you're doing good. And I think we've taken that approach with almost all our tests. Like we've gone, okay, let's go, what do we really care about here? All right, we really care about how well their ankle bends for dorsiflexion. Okay, let's measure their dorsiflexion in centimeters. Like let's just not try and measure 6 different things out of one test. Let's just chase the thing we want.
Pardon me.
You're a bit croaky still, aren't you?
Yeah. I got a corona test on Monday. Negative. Came back negative.
Yep.
But yeah, I woke up Sunday and Monday with quite a dry, sore throat. And I thought I'd lemsipped it today, but I haven't talked this much in a while, so it's coming back.
Let's not try and push it too far. We'll wrap up pretty soon. Is it because this is your first winter in your new house, isn't it?
Yeah, floorboards.
Different heating?
Floorboards. Lots of floorboards, and yeah, I think so.
It's all about the humidity.
All right.
Bodies they don't like the dryness.
That'll be it then.
Yeah. So in terms of the testing stuff, I think it's a good design principle in general of probably aim to test less, like chase less, but get better stuff that you're chasing. I think every time we've done that, I've got this terrible natural inclination to want to get all the things, but it's actually, if you can be that disciplined and do less, I think it almost always works better.
Yeah. I want to go back to one point you mentioned there as well, though, just to go a little bit circular for a second, is you talked about different tests, what other tests there are out there. It is worth mentioning why we haven't used other tests, I think, as well.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Good.
One of the most common ones is the Illinois agility test, which is one of those ones I don't like being told. You have to start on your belly, get up, sprint back, do some zigzagging, then do a few more sprints. That one's flawed, or fundamentally flawed, in the fact that, well, one, you start on the ground. If you start on the ground as an athlete, you've done wrong. You're going to end up on the bench or ripped by your coach. So it's not a good start. But also the test takes like 12 seconds. True agility in sport is about 3 seconds. You really don't do agility things with high intensity for many more than 4 seconds, maybe, sort of thing. Anything longer than that, you're going to start sprinting, or the play's over. Like, there's not that much.
So the test takes 12 seconds, so it takes 4 times longer. So it's the equivalent of trying to determine who's a better 100-meter sprinter by making everyone do 400s.
Yeah, which is different energy system, movement pattern, bends, the whole thing. Yeah, exactly.
It's quite different. Yeah.
So it's not so good, that one. And then the other one, which we do like but we don't use, is the 505. Which is where you get a flying start, you run through the beam, 5 meters, turn around, come back, and it's just one change, not 2 changes, or 3 if you want with the 5-10-5.
I'm a bit fuzzy. Why did we choose 5-10-5 over 505?
The flying start is a little less sport specific for things like tennis. So in tennis and volleyball, the court is so small that you're not actually going to get a flying 10-meter start before you start your change of direction thing. Yep. It's also a bit hackable in how you approach that first 10 meters into the test, because that's not timed. So you can approach that differently, either with a really hard, fast sprint or a slow jog and then sprint at the last minute, and kind of change how the test looks and feels.
And it's not just hackable, it's also going to be vulnerable to people doing it different ways based on their mood. And then you might see someone's agility's gone backwards when actually they just did a different run-up.
Exactly.
Whereas if you're starting from the middle and then just go, change, go, like that's pretty straightforward. Like you're going to do, it's very repeatable. You're going to do it the same way every time.
Yeah, first movement triggers the thing, then you're live the whole way through. What's also cool, and one of the things that made me think about doing this topic in the first place a couple of days ago, I was thinking about agility testing, and you can actually get your 5:05 time out of a 5:10-5 test. Because the second part of the test, so the last 10 meters, the last 5:05, when you go back through the gun, you could actually get a split and you could do your 5:05 that way. Because the nice thing about the 5:05 is you're measuring left leg versus right leg. So you do it twice. You do it once on the left, once on the right, and you see the different tests that way. And so you can just really quite quickly see which leg is better at changing direction.
Yep.
But you could get that out of your 5:10-5. You just have to tell the device that this is the left leg and then get the split on the cool. Second way back. So that's kind of a cool way you could get them both in one test. If you like your data.
We should play around with that with our data sometime.
We should, that.
Yeah, that's cool. I feel like we should also just give a quick, I think it's great to chat about testing, but also a quick reminder on the things that you would most like to practice in order to get better at the testing. Just like a couple of lead dominoes. I would say it's a combination of the ability to get into a reasonably deep stance, so some strength through your adductors and hips, so you can get low, because the ability to get a bit lower means that you can put you get those vectors right in terms of the angle you're putting into the ground when you change direction.
Lower center of mass,
Lower center of mass, yeah. That's as easy as just some basic bodyweight squats. And then I would say probably some form of single leg strength, because the change is all one leg. What else those are two strength things. What else would you think people should consider in terms of training for better agility?
3-step acceleration. Because agility is really just a combination of different multi-directional acceleration and deceleration. That's all it is. So having some sort of, that question there that just came up is something I want to touch on as well, as the COD deficit.
Yeah, cool.
But yeah, working on and being really aggressive with 3-step accelerations, like pop, 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 like getting out of the start line and going from 0 to top speed as aggressively as you can.
Yeah, because in the real world when we're coaching, that's such a good point you make, because it's so often that someone will come in and they'll bounce out of the cut. We'll have taught them to bounce out of the cut really well. What's going on?
Have I lost Durham? Has Durham lost me?
Hello? Hello?
Oh, we've lost Durham. Finn, we will get to your question as well. Let me just get Durham back in here.
Hello?
You dropped out.
Yeah, I swear I didn't touch anything. It just dropped out. It said, thank you for doing a live. Yeah.
See you later.
It was weird. So apologies for that delay, everyone. Where were we? They're bouncing out of the cut.
Yep.
Yep. And so you'll successfully get them lining their feet up nicely, getting that right angle, bouncing out of the cut. But then the real separation is often steps 1 and 2, where you've bounced out of the cut and created a little bit of space, but you really separate with those hard accelerations. So yeah, you're spot on.
Put the gas down.
That's actually often a big part, particularly on offensive maneuvers. Like if you are attacking, that ability to go one way, hit it, and then bang, and get that other foot down under your hip and really explode through. So yeah, that's just straight good old-fashioned acceleration training, really. It's a bit of skill, but it's just, do you have the grunt to put that force into the ground through the glutes and calves?
Yeah, which comes from strength, but also it comes from your mindset and actually attacking the sprint, being aggressive when you do that training, not just going through the motions. It's a 20-meter sprint. I'll wait till the 5-meter mark to sort of really start working. Yeah. It's like, no, work from step 1.
Yeah, go. It's amazing to me too how many people, and this often slips past less experienced coaches, how many athletes will heel toe their way out of that first foot strike. So they've been coached the hell out of that lovely agility, but then they're heel toeing and kind of dragging their way, trying to pull their way through with their hamstring rather than explode their way through the calf and glute.
Yeah, overreaching.
So that's a good thing to watch for. Yeah,
big time.
Get the foot under your hip. I got that from Boden Babicek. I remember watching him and talking to him about it, and he was really insistent that you've just got to treat that first step out of that change as that really explosive step and get the foot under your hip rather than out in front.
Yeah.
Now, what was Finn's question?
Finn asked about change of direction deficit.
Hey, Finn. How you doing? Thanks for tuning in.
So change of direction deficit is you take your 5-10-5, for example, and you get your time for that, 4.8, whatever it might be. And then you have an athlete run a same distance test, so that 5-10-5 adds up to be 20 meters. You have them then run a 20-meter sprint, and you subtract that time from their change of direction time. So your 5-10-5 time, for example, is 4.8, and then your 20-meter sprint time is 3.2. And what that tells us is there's a 1.6 second differential between those. And so you don't want the differential to be too low. That means you're slow, so your 20-meter sprint is too high. It's too close to your 5-10-5 time. But you also don't want it to be too big, which means you're weak. So it's kind of about the ratio between them. So a good 20-meter sprint, for example, is 3 seconds. 3 flat, 3.0 is pretty quick. And then a good 5-10-5 test, depending on the surface, is probably going to be around 4.7, 4.6 for a male, maybe 4.8 for a female athlete. Girls tend to be a little bit slower on these than the guys at the elite level. And so you've got those two different times. And then what you do is you subtract the sprint time from the change of direction time, and that tells you a little bit about whether it's a strength issue or a reactivity and a speed issue. So if your sprint is quite good but your agility is quite slow, then you're not slow across the test, you're just poor in the corners. And so there's probably a strength or a deceleration deficit going on there.
Because it's pinpointed the bit you're not good at. So you might have you might not have very good brakes, you might not have very good accelerators, but you're actually okay when once you're up at that speed.
Yeah, exactly. So what you could do is you could take your 5-10-5 test and you could do the 5-10-5 versus a 20 meter, or you could get that 5-05 split I was talking about before, and you could take that relative to a 10 meter sprint.
Given our constraint in our building, could we do it with a 15 or a 10?
You could, but then you'd need a test that's 15 meters. So your distances have to be the same, otherwise then the distance becomes a thing. So what you're better off is you're better off taking the second 5:05 out of the 5:10.5 and then comparing that to a 10-meter sprint. And so you've got your 10-meter sprint, which is usually 1.8 to 2.1, and then you take that relative to your 5:10.5, which is your 5:05, which is usually can be as quick as 1.3 seconds, pretty fast, and then you compare the two.
So in answer to Finn's question, do you think the question I always come back to is the juice worth the squeeze? What do you think, what information are we learning out of doing the deficit test that is going to influence our training adequately to enhance a performance enhancement, like to increase a performance enhancement?
Are we getting what we want? So for the test to be worth it, you've got to do it enough to get some normative data, because it's going to depend on the surface you do it on, the technology you use, so the type of timing gates, things like that. But once you've got some normative data and some population data, and you've compared different types of athletes to each other, and you've got that ratio, and you know what it means, and then if you know what it means and you can calculate it automatically, then yes, it's worth the squeeze.
Yeah.
But going through
you can calculate automatically.
So you need a system. You need a system, a spreadsheet or something like that you just punch numbers in and it comes up. If the number's between 1 and 2, it's green. If it's above 2, it's orange. If it's above 3, it's red, for example, for the ratio, whatever it might be. So it's all about being able to do it. So getting those first bits of data, the first 100 tests you do are pretty useless. I'm thinking about how we're going to do it here in the future.
Yeah.
They don't really tell us much. But the nice thing about it is you collect this automatically. You're collecting this automatically during your other testing anyway. It's just later on you apply the ratio to it and then you see what that means. And then down the track with your athletes.
It's one of my favourite things, by the way, when you've collected stuff already and later on you find different ways to interpret the relationships between. I love that because it's like finding gold twice. It's great.
And so for some athletes, you can then use that retrospectively and go, well, if you look at your 3 tests over time, your speed and your agility are both improving, but your ratio is still really bad. So we're kind of training the wrong things, for example. We need to change our focus, for example, with someone's training. So that's kind of how I'd think you'd use it. But you've got to – it'd be tricky then for us to say start doing it that way, and Finn or the AAS start doing it with their athletes on a different surface, done in a slightly different way. It would be hard to compare between them.
Yeah. Do you know
because if he's doing the test on a hardwood court, like a basketball court, and we're doing it on AstroTurf, the agility is going to be different because of the different surface coefficients and all that kind of stuff. So you wouldn't really be able to compare those kind of ratios across broader, global or national type populations. It'd really be specific to how it's done. So it becomes a bit nuanced.
It's I think we should round out with this very important statement around agility testing, which is it's incredibly susceptible to different levels of cleanliness on the surface you're using. So if it's luckily we've got our turf from Iron Edge, which is very year round. It's always got the same grip. It works beautifully. It's very predictable. Has a little bit of slip, but it's the same slip 12 months of the year. Like
it's the same slip every time you do it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's does that make it reliable?
Yeah.
That adds the reliability. Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas basketball courts and football grounds are hilariously unreliable because a footy ground the grass can be muddy. There can be different length of grass based on when it was last mown. There's all these things. And basketball courts are hilarious because you run an agility test on a basketball court in early Feb, and you are going to have world-class friction coefficient because it's just been repolished over the summer because they pretty much do that every year at most courts. And so they're clean as, they've often got 3 fresh layers of varnish on them, like the grip's out of this world. You do that same test in July and you look at your cohort, you go, oh my God, everyone's got worse. What am I doing wrong? No, dusty everyone's courts. Doing it on a dusty court that's had 6 months of wear and tear on it now. So you've always got to be mindful of those factors as well. I reckon that's a huge one.
It's funny you mentioned that because we actually had that happen where the I think the 5 or 6 fastest 5:10, 5:10 times we've got have been early year basketball Victoria testing events. Crazy athletes, like they definitely are in our top, 5% of athletes, but they all have
good on any day.
Significantly faster times because they're on that super sticky surface.
Super sticky, and they may have even fresh shoes because maybe they got fresh shoes for Christmas. Like, there's so many variables. But it's one of the reasons I love the grass in our place, because it's the same every time, so it's super reliable. Yeah. All right. I reckon that's plenty of chat about that. So we'll see you guys next week. Have a good week. Hopefully next week is better than last week, and we can all look after each other and those around us. And have a good one.
Easy.
Awesome. Okay. See you guys.
See you,
Bye.
Bye.
And before you go, hear from some of our alumni about our career transforming course, the online mentorship. Learn more about how you can join at our website.
I learnt the theory stuff at uni, but I didn't know how to apply it, and coming to Core Advantage was how I bridged that gap. So I knew the stuff, but I didn't know how to do the stuff.
It was something that I needed to do personally for my own development, and it's allowed me to work in elite sport for now 5 years, so it was a massive help.
I think mentorship is really important, and being able to ask questions all the time, and the Core Advantage course allows that because there is a big team of people that you can ask questions.
I get to train professional athletes every week, work really closely with professional athletes, which is awesome. A lot of the skills that I'm applying I learned through the program at Core Advantage.
It's not just something that you read and then think about and then go, how does that tie into everything? It's something that practical that you can turn around and go, this is exactly how I'm going to apply it. And the concepts that you learn help you as a coach, as a professional, as a person. Yeah, it's awesome. Definitely go and do it.
To sign up for the online mentorship, head to coreadvantage.training/mentorship.